The wind came first. Low and restless, sliding over the prairie like a warning that never learned how to speak. Jonah Crow rode through it with his coat pulled high and his eyes narrowed against the dust. Folks said the land itself kept its distance from him. Horses shied. Men went quiet. Even the coyotes seemed to hush when his silhouette crossed the horizon. He was the most feared rancher for 50 miles in any direction, and fear, like drought, had a long memory out here. The sun was sinking when he saw her. She lay just inside his fence line. A small shape curled against the post like something the wind had dropped and forgotten. First he thought she was dead. Too still. Too small. Then her hand twitched. Jonah slid from the saddle slow. The world narrowed to the creak of leather and the sound of his boots in the dirt. He hadn't knelt for anyone in years, but his knees bent anyway. She was a girl. No more than 12. Her dress was torn and gray with road dust. Her hair knotted and matted. When her eyes opened, they were sharp with fear, old fear, learned fear. The kind that never sleeps. "Don't," she rasped, pulling back with what strength she had left. Jonah froze. His reputation had reached her before his voice ever could. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said. The words felt strange. Unused. Her stomach growled loud enough to shame the silence. Jonah looked at the fence, the land beyond it, the long road she must have walked. He thought of the things people said about him. How mercy had no place in his house. He thought of turning away. Instead he lifted her. The cabin door groaned open, lantern light spilling onto her hollow face. Jonah set a bowl of stew in front of her, steam rising like a prayer. She stared at it as if it might vanish. "Eat," he said. She did. Fast. Desperate. Like this might be the last kindness the world ever offered. Outside the wind kept moving. And somewhere far off men who counted people as property felt something shift. One meal had been given. And nothing on the frontier stayed unchanged after that. The cabin settled into night the way old bones settle into cold. Slow, reluctant, full of complaint. Jonah sat across from the girl, the lantern between them throwing long shadows that climbed the walls. She ate in silence now, slower, guarded, eyes flicking to the door, the window, the gun rack. She tracked exits like someone who had learned the cost of not knowing them. He didn't ask her name. Names had a way of binding things, of making promises a man wasn't sure he could keep. "You can sleep there," he said, nodding toward the narrow cot by the wall. She didn't move. Jonah waited. Patience had been beaten into him the hard way. Finally she spoke. "You gonna lock the door?" "No." "You gonna sell me?" The question landed heavy. Jonah's jaw tightened. "No." She studied him like she was reading a weathered sign, trying to decide if it lied. The night stretched. Wind clawed at the boards. Somewhere an owl cried. Jonah cleaned his rifle slow, methodical, the familiar ritual grounding him. The girl flinched at the sound of metal on metal but said nothing. Eventually exhaustion won. She lay down fully clothed, boots still on, hands clenched tight at her chest. Jonah took the chair by the door. He didn't sleep. Trust didn't come easy in a place where men disappeared and questions followed them into shallow graves. The cabin felt less like shelter and more like a held breath. A pause before something decided what came next. At dawn, pale light slipped through the cracks. The girl was still there. Still breathing. Jonah stood. He could walk her to town. Leave her with people who pretended to care. Wash his hands of it. Instead, he set another bowl on the table. "Eat," he said again. Her eyes lifted, something fragile flickering there. Not hope. Not yet. But the fear had shifted. And that was enough to keep her inside one more day. Days passed in careful inches. They worked without talking much. Jonah mended fence. The girl, quiet as a shadow, gathered eggs, swept the floor, learned where the boards creaked. She watched everything. Missed nothing. He learned her name by accident. She muttered it in her sleep. Lila. Fit her. Small. Soft. Stronger than it looked. She spoke of her past the way wounded animals move, circling it, never stepping too close. Men who drank too much. Hands that lingered too long. Running in the dark with nothing but fear to guide her feet. "They said I belonged to 'em," she said one night, staring into the fire. Said papers made it true. Jonah's hand tightened around his cup. Papers. He'd seen what ink could excuse. He never told her why his name emptied rooms, why men crossed the street when he rode through town. But memory had a way of speaking for him. He remembered the bodies, the line he'd crossed when law failed and patience ran out. How fear had kept him alive but taken everything else. Lila noticed the scars. Old bullet wounds. A burn across his forearm. "You a bad man?" she asked. Jonah thought of the question for a long time. "I been one," he said. "Ain't sure I am anymore." She nodded like that made sense. One evening as the wind rose again, she pulled something from her dress. A folded paper worn thin. Names. Figures. A seal burned into the corner. "They wanted this," she whispered. "Said I didn't know what it meant. But I knew it mattered." Jonah read it once. Then again. It mattered. And now so did she. Hoofbeats cut the afternoon clean in half. Jonah saw them coming long before they reached the fence. 3 riders. Clean coats. Easy confidence. Men who believed the land already belonged to them. They stopped just short of the gate. "Afternoon, Crow," the lead man said, smiling like a knife. "Heard you been entertaining guests." Jonah rested a hand on the fence. "Ain't heard much worth listening to." The man chuckled. "We're looking for a girl. Wandered off. Causes trouble wherever she goes." Jonah's eyes never left him. "Plenty of trouble wanders these parts." The smile thinned. "You got a history of not minding your own business." Jonah leaned in. "And you got a history of riding away." Silence stretched. Wind rattled the wire. "We'll be back," the man said finally. "Would hate for old debts to come due." They turned and rode off, dust hanging where they'd been. Lila stood in the doorway, pale. "They'll kill you," she said. Jonah closed the gate. "They'll try." The ranch changed its posture. Windows were boarded, leaving narrow slits. Jonah buried cans along the approach, set wires low where horses would stumble. He cleaned every weapon twice. Lila watched. Learned. When he handed her a small revolver, she didn't hesitate. "Only if you have to," he said. She nodded. "I know." They worked side by side. No speeches. No promises. Just action. That night, the sky rolled with distant thunder. Jonah showed her where to stand, where to run. He placed the paper in a tin box beneath the floor. "We hold," he said. "Until morning." Lila looked at the cabin. At the man. "Thank you," she said quietly. Jonah didn't answer. Some things didn't need words. They came at dawn. 6 riders. Then 8. Guns gleaming. The lead man rode forward alone. "Last chance," he called. "Hand her over." Jonah stepped into view. No. The first shot shattered the quiet. Bullets tore into wood. Smoke filled the cabin. Jonah fired from the window, dropping a rider clean. Lila reloaded with shaking hands that never missed. Men fell. Horses screamed. Time broke into fragments, noise, silence, noise again. They tried fire. Jonah countered. They rushed. He met them. When the lead man burst through the door, gun raised, Lila stepped out from behind the table. "You don't own me," she said. She fired. The man fell. Rain began to fall then, sudden and hard, hissing against the flames, washing blood into the dirt. The rest fled. Morning came soft. The land smelled clean. Rain-soaked. Jonah buried the dead far from the house. He rebuilt the door. Lila slept real sleep for the first time in years. When she woke, sunlight filled the cabin. "What now?" she asked. Jonah looked at the fence. The open land beyond. "We live," he said. Outside, grass bent under the breeze, green and new. Out here, justice don't always wear a badge. Sometimes it looks like a bowl of stew. Sometimes it looks like a man choosing to stand when walking away would be easier. One meal changed everything. So I'll ask you, traveler, what would you have done? Would you have opened the door knowing the cost? Or turned away and let the wind carry the trouble elsewhere? If this story stirred something in you, keep the fire burning. Leave your thoughts below. Ride with us again. Subscribe so these frontier tales don't fade like footprints in the dust. Because as long as we remember them, the land still speaks.